Welcome to the Pearls of Wisdom podcast, where we mix business, law of attraction, spirituality, and well-being with great guests and phenomenal stories. You'll hear hints, tips, and up-to-the-minute information on digital communication from an expert in her field. Pearl has some wonderful individuals in her networks, and she will be interviewing them all at some point in the future. Enjoy your listening.
Well, hello and welcome to another of the Pearls of Wisdom podcast episodes. And today we're doing another one of the International Women's Day series. And yes, I know anyone listening to this is going to say, Pearl, it's way past the 8th of March. But International Women's Day, the theme and the organisation last throughout the year. And there is always a time to share a strong, empowering message that's going to help women learn and grow. So today, I've got a lovely, lovely lady. We've tried a few times to get to do this interview, but today is the day, which means it's going to be absolutely perfect. Today, I'm speaking to Sid Femtino. Now, Sid, welcome. Thank you to the interview. Thank you to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It's so wonderful. What I'm going to do before I launch into all the questions, because this started off specifically as a social media post, I'm going back to people's social media profiles, and I've chosen your LinkedIn profile. I'm going to read from that. And if everyone, all the listeners, you will see just how exceptional this lovely lady is. Sid is the founder of the UK Virtual School, H&W Creative Tutor, Education Disruptor, I love that. STEM Award winner, that's even better still. An education consultant. Now that profile is fantastic. You've got so much you could offer.
Thank you. And it's been quite a journey as well. So I'm so excited to be sharing it with you.
Oh, this is brilliant. And the fact that you're saying that leads me directly in to this first question, this introductory question, which could last the whole interview, just depends how things flow. But Sid, what I'm asking everyone that's doing these International Women's Day interviews, could you share your career path with us, please? So anyone listening, and I say to people if they're listening and they've got maybe young girls in their family or family and friends that you feel will benefit from listening to this episode, please share it with them as well. So Sid, would you share your career path so that we can see just how you can empower others and how you've got to where you are now, please?
Yeah, brilliant. So I don't know where to start. I think I'm going to start from when I was a kid, because I've been in education throughout my entire life. And what I do at the moment is within the same sector. So I remember when I was a kid, when I was around 5 years old, and just being so excited by just the option of being able to learn. I think as you're a kid, you're very curious about the world. You want to absorb everything that's out there. And I remember being kind of inspired by facts and just anything. I loved it. I loved learning. And then I got to around 10 and my parents moved schools for me. So I went to a different primary school. And that was the very first time I received homework. Now, this is going to sound really sad, but I was so excited. It was a novelty, right? Because I had homework. And for someone that loves learning, it's such an exciting thing to get. Like, oh, my teacher's going to look at it. I'm going to get like personal feedback. This is so exciting. And that very first piece of homework was a science project. And I remember it really clearly. We had to do a project on space. And back then, we didn't have computers and we didn't have internet. We didn't have all of this social media stuff. So we had to, I got my dad to get me some books from the library. And I remember going through them and creating a lovely project. And I got first place and I loved it. It was like, that's my first homework and I got first place. But just doing that project kind of got me excited about science. And I think that was the planting seed. I always say to parents that the seeds get planted really young. So inspire your kids when they're still in primary school, get them to look at careers. So I remember that seed got planted when I was 10. And then my parents wanted me to go to the best school possible. And so they put me in for the 11 plus. And again, I was so excited to be learning how to pass the exam. I was like, oh, this is so, except I couldn't figure out how to do the stuff. And I remember doing the first paper on my own and I got 0 out of 100. And I was like, Mum, I need help. I don't know how to do this. And they got me a tutor. And back then, we couldn't afford tutors for a huge amounts of money. So I remember having a tutor only for around 3 months leading up to the exam. And because I was so kind of absorbed into the learning, I used to go in armed with questions. And this is another thing that I still kind of tell parents is like, if you're hiring a tutor, maximize that time by getting your child to sit tests outside of the lesson and bringing the questions to class, because that's how you maximize the time. And that's how I did it. And I passed. And then suddenly secondary school, everything changed. It wasn't about the excitement of learning anymore. Now it became about competing with your peers. It became about getting that grade and getting that exam mark. And suddenly over the years from year 7 to year 10 and towards GCSE, I got really good at passing tests and exams. Suddenly it wasn't about the learning anymore. It wasn't about the excitement of the learning. It just got to the point where I just got really good at passing the exams. And I sailed through my GCSEs and A levels. And then I got to uni and I ended up doing theoretical physics and applied maths.
Oh.
I know, which sounds scary. I loved at A level, I did physics, maths, and art and textiles. So I had that creative side and I had the analytical side. And then my art teacher, I fell out with my art teacher. She wanted me to do an art project on death and like darkness. And I was like, no, I want to do something colorful. And because that was my personality. And I was like, I don't want to do something about death. And she marked me down deliberately. She gave me 2 grades lower. And that meant I couldn't continue with art for my second year at A level. And I was really disappointed. So I carried on with physics and maths and textiles. And then when it came to deciding what I wanted to do at uni, I had no idea. Like I was completely clueless. And I thought, well, I enjoy physics and I enjoy art and textiles and the creative side. But if I do something creative at uni, I won't ever be able to go back to maths and physics. It's going to be much harder. But if I do maths and physics, I can always go back to art. So that was kind of my thinking. And also just hearing people say, what are you going to do with something arty at uni? Like, how is that going to get you a job after? So I ended up doing physics and maths, and I stayed for 4 years and I got my master's. And again, by the 4th year, I just got really good at passing the exams and knowing what to write. And I remember the 4th year, we had to derive Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared. And I learnt 4 pages of how to do it. I didn't understand how to do it. I just learned it off by heart and replicated it in the exam. And that's how I got through my education. And then it got to the point where I was looking at becoming a teacher. So I did take a year out and I set up my own business and I ran out of my savings. And then I landed, I got headhunted for a job as an unqualified teacher. And I remember taking that up. And for the first time, I was a bit stumped because I got given a textbook and I got given a specification. And then as I started to go through it, and even though I'd done that at uni, I'd done it at A level, suddenly I realized I didn't really understand any of it. It's like all of those years of education, I just got really good at passing the exams. And I thought about all the questions that the kids were going to ask me. And I was like, I actually don't know how I would answer that because I don't understand why I do what I did. I just knew how to answer the exam question. And then over the couple of years, I realized how very little I actually knew. And the more I taught, the more questions that the kids would ask that were very kind of curious questions and things that I didn't directly know the answer to. And the more I realized how much of my education was based on passing exams, and I'd lost that love of learning at some point. Yeah. And it made me realize, and I actually looked back at my 4 years at uni and I couldn't remember a single thing because I only learnt the stuff for the exam and then it was gone. And I thought, I've just messed up like 4 years of my life where I've got a degree for it, but I don't remember anything. And it feels like a waste in some regards. And I thought, about all those kids, because as I was teaching, there were some kids I realized. So I did 2 years unqualified, and then I trained as a qualified teacher, and I worked in state and private and grammar schools. And one thing I realized was it was great. Like, school was great for kids that were able to pass the exams like I did. But then there were loads of other kids that were that were just going through the net,
Yeah.
that they were smart. They were very smart, except they didn't want to sit down and do the boring stuff because they found it too easy, right? And they didn't want to just sit and just do the bare minimum for the exams. They wanted a little bit more engagement. And they were the ones that were actually really smart, but then were being classed as the troubled kids.
Yeah.
And the more I saw that, the more I realized that actually I can't stay within the system. It's supporting, it's actually hurting the kids that need the support.
Yeah.
And I also saw a whole load of discrimination. I remember seeing how a black kid was classed as a troubled kid. And I remember the first lesson I had with him, because I'd been told by other members of staff, he's a troubled kid. Like, don't let him get away with something. Tell him off if he does this. So I became that teacher. And I remember the first time that I told him off, and I kicked him out of the class because he punched another kid. And when I went to speak to him, he wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't answer me, and that made me even more angry. And then there was another teacher who'd been in the school for like 25, 30 years, and he said to me that actually within the black culture, they won't look at you in the eye. It's a sign of respect. So he actually respects you because he didn't look at you in the eye. And the fact that he didn't answer you is actually a sign of respect. And just that kind of glimpse into, actually, maybe I've got him all wrong. That I'm judging him by my standards, by adult standards, and actually we just don't understand him right now. And I took a different approach where I started to watch and not really tell him off straight away. And I realized the other kids were picking on him.
Yeah.
And then it was him actually reacting to that the teacher would see, that I was seeing. And suddenly when I started realizing that, the dynamics of the class changed then, because then I wouldn't tell him off. I just make sure that the other kids knew that they couldn't get away with that. And suddenly that relationship with him changed. But in other classes, he was still getting told off and all of this. And I remember one time the head of department came to my class, pulled him out, and yelled at him so loud the entire class heard. And I felt so sorry for him. He'd basically chucked a chair across the room in the class before me. And he wouldn't speak to the teachers of what happened, why he did it. And because of that, he was getting, he was close to getting excluded or expelled. And he was in tears. And I remember seeing him that lunchtime in the canteen. And I went up to him and I sat next to him and I said to him, how hard has your mom worked to make sure that you get into this school? And because it was a grammar school, and he goes, oh, she's worked really hard. And I said, well, what would happen if you got expelled from here right now? How disappointed would she be? And he looked at me and he said, Miss, they pick on me. And he wasn't talking about the kids. He was talking about the staff. And I felt so upset. Like, how can you? Like, he's a kid. He was 11, and he felt that from the teachers that are meant to be supporting him and helping him. And I said to him, because at that point I'd suffered discrimination at the school as well. It was a horrible place to be, and I'd already handed in my notice, and I was due to leave. And I said to him, you just got to work with it. You need to play the game. Because you need to stay in this school, you need to get your GCSEs, you need to become something to then be able to make change in the world. Because you can't, if you get expelled, that's going to stay on your record, right? And the sad thing is, I couldn't cut it out at that school. I had to leave because it was so damaging. And it just hurts me that there are kids in the system that are having to endure that and have to just take it. And the effect that it must have on a long-term basis. So I remember leaving from that school and thinking there has to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to do things. And I'd already started a business, but I pivoted that. and made it all about a love of learning, and made it all about it being the focus of it being not an exam or an end result or the curriculum, but just kind of exploring and enjoying learning. What I had when I was 5, what I had when I was 10, and kind of bringing that to the surface again, and also then coaching the parents to kind of see, actually, it's not all about the exams. It's not all about getting GCSE grades. That will come. If your kid enjoys learning, that will come, right? And so that's what I've been focusing on over a decade, because I was still doing it while I was teaching, just not that much, because I thought if I could find everything that I needed in a school, I didn't need to do anything outside of school. Except every school I worked in had its flaws, and you could see it's part of the system. It's not about the school being able to make changes. A lot of it's inbuilt into the system, in that it's not about growth mindset, even though they do growth mindset training, which is all about the power of and taking failure as a learning opportunity and all of that. That's great, except the system is not set up to actually implement that. So you can have this amazing training, but if the system is flawed and it doesn't have, I do think it's outdated. It's set up in an era where they needed people to conform, and they needed people to be trained up in a certain way. And now the 21st century isn't about that. It's about innovation. It's about creativity. It's about seeing the world differently. And those very kids that are going to be the innovators of the future are the ones where they're being failed by the system. So then I thought, well, what can I do? What can I do about this? And that's where Femtino's really became what it is now. It became about inspiring the next generation of STEAM, not just STEM, but STEAM, so art in there as well. And I've done hundreds of workshops, which I've developed, and I hardly ever repeat the same workshop over again, because I think there's so much there to learn. So I enjoyed the process of learning new content. And we've done everything from dissections with as young as 5-year-olds. And this is the other thing, dissections aren't even done at secondary level anymore because of health and safety. But what I've learned is, if you actually give kids the responsibility and you get them excited about something, and you tell them the consequences of what happens if they don't pay attention, because they could actually cut off one of their fingers, and you kind of give them those guidelines, and you give them the responsibility, and they live up to it. Like, kids live up to expectations. If you expect them to mess up, they will mess up. If you expect them to be able to get through a dissection and be able to participate, they'll get through it. And I've done loads of dissections with kids as young as 5, where they've dissected brains and hearts and lungs, and it's always exciting. So we always do, we don't go straight into the dissection, but they cover about the organs and things, and they learn about careers and everything, and then they do the dissection. And by that point, they've seen the images, they learnt the content, they know how it functions, and suddenly they're so excited to see all the parts of it in reality. So I found that I've worked with 12,000 kids over the last 10 years.
Wow.
And it's been exciting. I've worked with so many home educated kids. So these are kids that have been let down by the system. Either they've been bullied, or they've got special educational needs, and the schools haven't met their needs. And sometimes parents feel like they can do a better job at home, and a lot of the times they do, because they're able to provide that one-to-one support. So I've had the pleasure of working with so many different types of kids, and I still do. But what happened when COVID hit was everything had to stop, because suddenly you can't do the hands-on workshops anymore. We couldn't meet up, and I tried to do things online, and they didn't work, because it's the whole premise of Femtino's was hands-on creative learning, and there's only so much you can do online, and I couldn't physically send out the equipment to them. It was just too difficult. So I had to put things to a pause, and I lost my income overnight, basically. And so March 2020 was, that March was actually the 10th, not March, August 2020 was meant to be the 10th anniversary of Femtino's. And so in March we stopped, and we couldn't even have the celebration that year. But it'd been 10 years by that point that I'd been running the business. And we'd worked with so many kids, and suddenly all of that had to stop. And it took me until May. So what was that? March, April, May. So 3 months 3 months of kind of trying out different things. I tried teaching online. I started up a YouTube channel, Learn with Sid, where I did a live every single day, and I had kids watching and taking part and sending me pictures. Then I did some online courses, and I tried everything just to see what would work. And nothing really was working that well. And then I remember so it's Ramadan right now, and this time last year, I remember taking a month off for Ramadan and going, right, I need time. I was exhausted because I tried so many things and it wasn't working. And I remember taking a month off and thinking, okay, I just need to slow down because my body can't cope with trying to do so much. And then after Ramadan, I remember coming back to work, even though in my house, coming back to work and kind of going, right, I need to think about what's next. And I had an idea. I thought, what if I set up an online school where it's not about the creative learning, but it's just about the curriculum learning, but we do it in a different way and we demonstrate how it can be done differently. Because I knew, even though I was working a lot with home educated kids and I was working with kind of thinking outside the box and all of these amazing stuff, there were still parents that wanted the curriculum. Like, I couldn't get away from that. They still wanted curriculum content. And as much as I think that the curriculum is outdated and all the rest of it, there's still a thirst out there for it because people want their kids to go through the system and they want them to get their GCSEs and be able to do well in life, which is fair enough. And I thought, well, what if I set up a separate business and it's an online school and we cater for specifically home educated kids that actually their families do want to follow the curriculum? Because there's loads out there that don't. But what about those families that do want to follow it? How could we demonstrate a different way of doing things? And I had my experience from school where I knew growth mindset wasn't being implemented properly. The kids were competitive. They were competing against each other. I didn't like that. It should always be about competing with yourself and not with each other. And there were always cases where kids were clearly in the wrong class because they hadn't understood the concepts from the year before, and yet they were being moved on, even though they didn't quite understand the content and they were being pushed into another year. And prior to COVID, I was working for the LEA as well, where I would work specifically with kids that were behind in school. So I'd go in and support one-to-one. And I remember working with one particular child who was in year 6, but he was working at a year 2 level. Right. So he'd been let down all of those years, and all of those years his mum had been pushing the school for support and he didn't get any. And I remember the first class, I went in and I observed. So the first lesson, they wanted me just to observe him because they were doing something important in class. So they didn't want him to miss it. And I just observed, and they had a TA, a teaching assistant in the class. And I just watched, and she would do the stuff for him. She didn't allow him to think. She would go there and she'd go, oh, no, you do it like this. Like they were folding a piece of paper. He folded it wrong. So instead of going, right, have another go, she went and she did it for him. And then he was doing fractions and he got something wrong. And instead of explaining where he'd gone wrong, she went and did it for him. And I was like, that's why he's being let down, because he's not being allowed to think for himself. And then the session after, I took him separately and I worked with him on a one-to-one basis. And all he said to me was, I'm really bad at maths. I can't do maths. I just can't do it. And I said, no, you can. You can. You haven't done it the way that I'm going to teach you. And I was like, what subject do you like? And he goes, art. I said, okay, let's do an arty maths. We're going to do graffiti maths. And we got a big sheet of paper, we got some felt tip pens, and I wrote some sums in like a graffiti fashion, and then we did some basics, and he was really at a year 2 level. He didn't know any of the basic stuff, and we kind of built on that, and slowly and surely he started to make progress. And it's kids like that where they go through the system and they haven't properly understood something and they're left behind. And so I wanted to create a school where it catered for all of these needs, where it wasn't about putting them into age groups, but more about matching them to the right ability. Yeah. So they were challenged but not overwhelmed. and also to be with to be matched with the right kind of level, not to be kind of competing with each other, not to constantly being marked and assessed, because that's the one thing that kind of makes kids anxious about learning. It's like everything that they do has red pen all over it and it gets marked, right? They don't have the ability to be creative and just be themselves. So it's like, how do I create a school that does all of that? So UK Virtual School was born, and the idea behind that is it's a school for homeschooled home educated kids, and during the pandemic it became also a great online resource for families that were temporary shielding, and well, all schools were closed, weren't they, at one point, so families could opt in, and then we've had like the long-term homeschoolers that have stayed with us, and so at UK Virtual School we only run 3 weeks in a month. We start from the first Monday and we run for 3 weeks. Because I thought, why is school 6 weeks at a time? It's so exhausting.
Yep.
And like it's so exhausting. Kids are tired. At the end of each term, they have a week where they just watch like movies and change like the what they call the boards on the like displays and things like that, where because they're so exhausted to learn, right? And I was like, well, what if we changed the structure of the school? What if we just had 3 weeks? So I think what I'm doing at UK Virtual School is demonstrating that there's a different way that school could work. So we only do 3-week terms where they always have a week off at the end of the month. We don't mark homework. We don't set tests. We don't assess them. We don't. We match them to ability rather than put them in age groups.
Yeah.
And they all are doing so well. And we also don't, we also, if we've got kids that are special educational needs, we will adapt to their needs rather than, this is the other thing that I saw at school, that special educational needs were an add-on.
Yeah.
Like, the class teacher would cater for like the average kid, and they'd be like, oh, okay, and we need to do something for the special educational need kid, right? And they'd be like an add-on, they'd be an afterthought. And I don't think that's the way it should be. It should be catered for the kid that's got the special needs, and then everyone else can adapt easily, right? And that's how we've kind of built the school from that basis. And so I've been running that at the moment, and I think there's loads of, when you go throughout life, you'll find that there's gaps, there's things that aren't working, and people like to moan, and I used to moan, of course, yeah, have a moan about it, have a rant about it, but also then make a change. Like, what can you do to implement that change? And so what I've kind of done is, all the businesses that I've worked in have always been about, I've seen something not working, and then I've gone right, I can demonstrate how it should be, right? I can complain about it, but I can also demonstrate how I think it should be. And then that's the one thing, people complain, but then they don't have a solution. I'm like, well, okay, I'm not going to be one of those people. I'm going to show people that there's a solution. So that's kind of what I'm doing with UK Virtual School and what I did with Femtinos. And then the other thing that I also noticed was that there wasn't support for educators. As in, when I started 10 years ago, setting up my business, because Femtino started 10 years ago, and back then there wasn't a support structure. There wasn't any kind of support for educational businesses. There's generic business support, but education is a very niche industry, and things are done slightly differently. And I found that what worked, or what even works and generally in the business world, didn't sit ethically well with me. Like, one of the things that they're taught in marketing is to look at your competitor really closely, right? And to kind of assess your competitor, to pretend to be a customer, to get all the details. And to me, that doesn't really sit that well. I'm like, well, no, like, I don't want to do that. So like, and the way that I've always done it is, I've always found what the issues are that the clients or the customers are facing, and you just find a solution for that. And having that conversation with them during that process, they will tell you naturally. They'll be like, oh, we've tried this and this and it doesn't work because of this. So they're doing your competitive analysis anyway for you from that perspective. And so I found that there's lots of things that I've picked up over the 10 years that I thought actually these will be really valuable for other businesses or other teachers turned into entrepreneurs or turned into like education businesses. So during COVID, I also set up a support network for educators. So it's called UK Educators Community. And that has become a really kind of go-to place for other educators that have got questions, but I also run like training workshops and support and offer like a coaching service for people that are setting up or have set up but need direction. Because I've grown UK Virtual School within 6 months. So we started in June, and by January, February, we had a team of 18 staff.
Wonderful.
So it's grown really quickly. And I've had challenges. Like I've had to do a lot of reading around leadership training. And I was like, I don't know how to be a leader. And how do I manage people? I find it so much easier to manage kids. And suddenly you have adults and they have their baggages and they've got all of these issues. And I'm like, oh, this is so much more hard work. So I've had to do a lot of reading and kind of personal development from my end. But I thought it'd be great to have a community where we had other educators support each other. So UK Educators has been set up for that reason. And then more recently, I've had an idea. I was like, I've actually been shielding and been isolated since 13th of March 2020. I've not seen no one. Because prior to that, I used to see about 100 people a week. And I decided that on the 2nd of March, before lockdown happened, that I was going to stop my workshops. And this is the other thing. People wait for everyone else to do things. Yeah. And I'm not like that. I'm like, I'm going to be a trailblazer. I'm going to do things that I feel is right and take people with me. So on the 2nd of March, I decided it wasn't safe to continue my workshops because I had a workshop that day, and we were doing about fossil fuels. And the kids were dressed up in miners' gear. They had the jackets and the hard hats, and they had like a helmet with a light on. And we'd created a mine underneath a table. We'd covered it with a black cloth, and we'd put little pieces of rock in there, which they had to dig up, and they had to find pieces of coal. So they were doing this activity to find out how miners' conditions were and how coal is mined. And one of the kids, he found like his piece of coal and he was licking it. He was only 6. And I was like, oh, there's a virus going around. I can't have them licking stuff. It's like, you can't control kids from doing that. Like you can't minimize the risk of COVID by getting kids to wash their hands, because they'll still be touching, they'll be licking, they'll be doing everything, right? So I thought, okay, this isn't safe. I can't continue doing this. And I'm in Birmingham. And at that point, COVID hadn't reached Birmingham officially. I kind of guessed it was here, but there was no record of it being in Birmingham. And I thought a lot of the families I work with, they live in cross-generational households and multi-generational households. And I was like, if anyone got ill because of me, because they've been in my session, I don't think I could forgive myself. So I made the decision that there weren't going to be any more workshops. People had paid up until like the beginning of April. And so what I did instead was I created boxes of materials and I hand delivered them home. I think it took me like 8 days to create the boxes, and then it took like 8 hours to hand deliver them around Birmingham. It was a bit of a nuisance, but I thought it's the safest way to go ahead. And by the 13th of March, that's when there were talks of a lockdown. We were all set up to do some stuff online. Like I'd already told the parents, we're not going to have any workshops. Give me some time to put some boxes together. And they all thought I was a bit mad, but they didn't say anything. They all thought I was a bit insane. They were like, oh, it's just a bit, it's not going to get to Birmingham. And then 13th of March, I remember being sat outside my local supermarket, my local groceries, actually. I went that day, and it just felt, I got some stuff and I sat in my car and I thought, this is probably the last. I don't know why I felt this. I was like, this might be the last time I see this place in a while. I remember thinking that to myself, and I was like, no, it can't. I'll probably see it in a few months' time. It'll be fine. And little did I know that would be the last time I'd be seeing it in a very long time, because I haven't been to that store in over a year now. And then so I did my sessions online and for a couple of weeks, and that's when lockdown started to happen and everything kind of kicked off. And I'd already released an hour-long video, I think, in the first week of March, saying, guys, you got to stay at home. Like, this is dangerous. Like, I'd done my research. Me being a scientist, I went and I got all the sources, and then I put them all in my live stream. I was like, these are all the sources that I've looked at. And I think you need to be taking this seriously. Like, stay at home. Don't go out if you need to go out, unless you really need to go. And so, because I've got a lot of parents that respect me, they started to take precautions, and they started to pay attention, and they started to restrict going out. And then lockdown happened, and then we weren't allowed to go out. But like, I'd like to say that maybe I saw it coming, but I don't think I was any more prepared. I was for a few weeks because it kept me busy doing the workshops. But after that, I wasn't prepared. Like, I was like, oh, I don't know what to do now. But I always say to people, don't be afraid being the first one to say something or to do something. If you feel it's right, go for it. Because people need leaders. And even though I don't think of myself as a leader, I just think of myself as being really opinionated and having opinions and thoughts on everything. And those thoughts might not be shared by everyone. And some people get offended, or some people don't like it, and they will challenge, and it's fine. I'm happy to be challenged on ideas. But one thing I realized is that you got to not be afraid to stand up for what you believe. And if you believe that something is wrong or something isn't right, then stand up for it, and then actually demonstrate why it isn't, and put things in place to show how there's an alternative. And I have kept to the fact that I think me being inside is reducing COVID, because I am one less person that's spreading it. And I can't be, this is the other thing, like, do as I say, but not as I do, is the way that a lot of political leaders lead. And I think we need leaders that actually do as they say, do as I do, because I've stuck to what I've said, which is don't go outside, don't spread it. Because the last thing I wanted to do was me telling everyone else not to spread it, but then me going out and then and actually, being a hypocritical. So I've stuck with ordering online. I've not actually gone out at all, and I've demonstrated that actually it's possible. You can do it. It's possible. It's really possible. And this is what I think I'm all about. It's just demonstrating that there are other ways to do things, and when there are other ways, that actually, instead of just suggesting them, actually demonstrating to other people, like, if I can do it, you guys can do it too. So I'm all about that. So it's been, I started counting the days I was at home at one point, and I remember getting to a day 180, and I kept a diary on Facebook, on my social media account, saying day 180, and this is what I'm doing today. And then at some point I stopped. But it's been well over a year now that I haven't seen anyone. And I've kept myself busy by doing all these projects and trying to make a change, even if it's just from my laptop. But through UK educators at the moment, I'm thinking end of next year, end of 2022, I'm hoping it should, if everything goes well, it should be better in terms of COVID and restrictions and things like that. Even though we're opening up now, I'm not so sure whether we'll be opened up for very long. But I'm hoping by the end of next year, it should be better. So I've set up a retreat for the educators, because they've worked so hard this past year. So it's going to be a business and cultural retreat in Marrakesh. And we're going to be hopefully going for, they've got an option between 5 or 10 days, and the 10-day one, we're going to go to the desert as well. And so we're hoping that that's going to be possible. And one of my kind of long-term vision, and I think I've always been in education, but I've gone in and out and done lots of different things. But and I only just realized this since January this year, that my vision is to impact the world through education. But also I want to go to rural places all around the world and do what I do in the UK there. So actually do workshops and do teacher training and to support educators that are wanting to set up initiatives and do all of that kind of stuff. So to stay true to my vision, part of the UK Educators Retreat, we're going to spend a day in the Atlas Mountains. And all the educators are going to be teaching a lesson in an Amazigh school in the village, where they will then part of the fee of the retreat is going to be it's going to like 5% we're contributing to the village school as well. So we're kind of giving back to the community. And I'm really strong, like I strongly believe education can change lives. Like if it's done right, it can change lives. It can give people so much. And I think a lot of charity is done where we think giving money is enough. We need to give skills. We need to give people the ability to go and fend for themselves and to set up initiatives and set up things that they can do. And that's what I'm really passionate in doing. So I've only just found my calling in January this year. I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And so now everything's kind of coming into place. I feel like everything that I'm working towards, that UK virtual school, also at some point we want to travel. Even though we're an online school, we want to do residential trips for the kids where they are going to different countries and learning about the cultures. Because one major thing, I feel like I'm talking so much. One major thing that is missing, that I feel is missing from the education system, is the ability to understand that Britain is an accumulation of cultures from all over the world and kind of science from all over the world and technology from all over the world, and the maths and everything that we do is actually not British. It's actually from all over the world. But when we teach primary science, what do? We teach about Einstein, we teach about Newton, we teach about all of these white European male scientists, and it paints an illusion that actually we've accomplished everything that we have in Britain because of these white people, white men predominantly. Like women are not recognized. The contributions from other places in the world, especially from Arabia, where it was so central to science, that the Middle East was central to science, that's not recognized. There's no recognition from any African scientists. And only until fairly recently, when I was doing some workshops, I think 2 years ago, I was working with a library. We were doing a whole project around 60 years since the space mission. And the librarian asked me, she goes, "Are there any Black scientists?" And I was just stumped. I was like, I don't know. And I felt so embarrassed that I couldn't actually mention any. And then I started doing some research, and Africa is full of some amazing scientists. Its history is rich in science development, yet we don't hear about it. When we think of Africa, what do we think of? We think of this poor nation. We think of kids that are malnourished. We think of people needing money, and we just chuck our money towards them. But actually, they are rich in an education and in science that we don't recognize. And I think it's about expectations again, right? We don't expect Africa to be this wealthy nation, so we kind of paint this image, and it's like an endless cycle. And I think what we need to start doing is actually recognizing that the world has contributed so much to what we currently do in our education system. And until the school system starts to implement all of these amazing inventions from all over the world, we're not going to appreciate the contributions. The kids are not going to recognize. There's always going to be this foreign or other, and this is British and this is the other. Actually, it's all merged together in such a way that we don't even understand. Like I remember teaching algebra in one of my workshops, and because we ran our own workshops, we didn't have to follow a curriculum. I was like, let's look at the history of algebra. Before we start actually looking at algebra, let's look at the history of algebra. And I remember doing the research and just being just astonished at how little I knew about this. And I've got a master's in maths, and I did not know the history of algebra. Like it started off during the Babylonian times, and you can have a look at like their kind of cave drawings where they're working out Pythagoras theorem, and they've got all of these letters, and it's so amazing. And then there was contribution through in India by Brahma Gupta. He contributed to algebra. Then there was contributions by Diophantus from Greek and from Greece, and he also did a lot of work around algebra. Then Al-Khwarizmi from Arabia, from the Middle East, I think he was from Iraq, and I think he was from Iraq or from Persia, from somewhere in the Middle East, and he actually coined it. He called it al-jabr in Arabic, which then got translated to algebra in English, right? So all of these contributions, they're from every like part of the world, and yet we don't think of algebra as a worldwide contributed like theory. We think of it as being a very European thing, and it's not. And I think as soon as we start to recognize the achievements and the input that has been a global development, I think kids would start to see the world in a completely different light. And part of what I'm trying to do at UK Virtual School, like this year has all been about the core subjects. From September, we're introducing something called worldviews. And again, this is me finding that there's a gap in the schooling system currently. And one of like the downsides from like RS is great, but I think it could be majorly improved. Like they only touch on the 5 major religions, right? And one of the things that I always found really confusing is like Britain has got a whole history in paganism, and we never learn a single thing about it.
Yeah.
Like as an adult, I know nothing. I know nothing about paganism. And like, why? Like it's the root of like the whole of the British culture. Like why don't we know anything about it? And there's like so many hundreds of religions and beliefs and faiths out there that we never hear about. We only hear about the top 5. And I think that's really unfair. I'm like, well, what about everything else? Like the beauty comes in finding out something that it's so niche and so like untold. So part of what Worldviews is going to be about is that we're going to study one particular country a month and really delve deep. Not just look at the surface, but look at like the belief systems, look at the history. So it's going to be a combination of RS and geography and history and cultural studies, and maybe a bit of language as well, depending on where we're looking at. Because I think there's so much that the kids can learn from that experience. And then being in an online school, we could probably find an educator in that part of the world to kind of teach us culture from their perspective of how it is living there. And then if we've got a residential trip and we link it to that particular country, it just puts things into a completely different dimension. So I think that's what's missing at the moment in the education system. It's that love of curiosity of what's out there in the world, and actually realizing that we are who we are because it's a combination of everything. Like the Britain is not isolated, and we might be isolated in terms of our island, but we've taken contributions from everywhere. So I'm really excited by that, and just the thought of learning all of those things kind of excites me. So that's kind of been my journey. It's been all about kind of rekindling that sense of curiosity, and then being a problem solver, finding issues and kind of going, right, this is how I see how I can solve it, and actually demonstrating to others that it is a solvable problem. I'm not just complaining for the sake of complaining. You can solve it. And one of the other issues that I haven't had a chance to work on, and I really feel passionately about, touching on this as well, girls in STEM, girls and ethnic minorities in STEM. I think there's a big disparity between how many females go into the STEM field. So I used to run a radio show for 2 years in a community radio show, which was in an ethnic minority area. It was a radio show that was completely around science, and I called it Science with Sid. I don't do it anymore, but I did it for 2 years. And the whole purpose of that was to encourage and drive more girls to go, and well, anyone really. But so I didn't gear it towards girls, but hopefully me being as a role model for science would have encouraged other girls to go into it. But I loved that. I interviewed around 100 different guests from all over the world. I remember interviewing a planetary scientist from California. She was working at the California Institute of Technology, and her research was on Jupiter, like around Jupiter's moons. And we did an online conference call with her, and then the kids were asking questions. They called in and they asked questions, and then my workshops worked really well alongside that, because whatever I was delivering in my workshops, I would talk about it on my radio show, and I'd talk about the excitement of how I love this learning opportunity and how I want to share it with them. And then I'd get the kids to come on. And it was a great experience for them as well, because they got the opportunity to share their knowledge with the world as well and talk about their learning. So yeah, I loved that. And that was kind of my way of giving back to the community. I did it voluntary for 2 years, and I loved it. It was amazing. So I think there's lots of places where if you find that there's something wrong or there's something lacking, you could find a solution to it and then go and create that solution. But the one thing that I haven't done yet that I really want to work on is around diversity and inclusion, and actually tackling the institutional racism that exists in a lot of places, because I feel it on a day-to-day basis. I felt it when I was in school, and the thing is, I made up so many excuses to say no, it can't be that. Like, it has to be something else. I'm too new to the school. I'm too inexperienced. Like, I made up excuses, and then you realize when it was a year later, and I wasn't new to the school, and there was a new trainee, and I made a suggestion to the head of department, and he dismissed it. And then I mentioned my suggestion to the trainee, who was new. She made the suggestion to the head of department, and he said, "Oh wow, that's a brilliant idea. Same idea." Right? And he implemented it straight away. And I'm like, hang on a second. What's the difference between me and her? And the only difference was that I was brown and she was white. That I was wearing a hijab and she wasn't. And it was like, well, is that the only issue here? And I remember when I finally handed in my notice, it came after a period of 2 weeks where they ignored me completely. My department wasn't talking to me. They ignored me. Like, the adults, they completely ignored me for 2 weeks. And then I developed a really bad back pain to the point where I was teaching and it just hit me and I couldn't move. And I had to go to I sat down for ages and I was like, I can't even teach this class now. I had to go to the staff room and I had to say to them, I'm physically in so much pain right now. Someone needs to go and cover my class. And that was the first time they spoke to me and they said, "Shall we call an ambulance?" I was like, "No, I just need to rest. And I stayed in that seat for 5 hours because I was in so much pain. That 2 weeks of, well, it was actually a year and a half of stress that had accumulated was now surfacing as a back pain.
Yeah.
And I realized that this is it. I need to hand in my notice. Like, I need to leave. I need to get out of this place. It was making me ill. All right. And that was the same school that kid said to me that he was being picked on. So it was a horrendous place. And one thing I realized, that when I was doing my teacher training, I was in the best teacher training provider in the whole of the UK. And they did a session on diversity and inclusion. I got really excited. I thought, this is going to be about, because Birmingham's so diverse, right? I was like, this is going to be about looking at each other's cultures. I'm going to be learning about stuff that I don't know. It's going to be amazing. And I was disappointed. Like, the entire, like, it was a half-day training. The entire training was challenging my faith. That's basically what the training was. I remember, like, one of the scenarios, and I was the only Muslim in the entire cohort. One of the scenarios that they put forward was, and it shocks me. They said, a kid has lost his grandfather. He goes to the funeral in Pakistan. What should we do? Right? And, like, one of the suggestions, which was like the training provider, like the ladies at the front, they nodded in approval. One of the suggestions was, we should contact Prevent because he might be going for terrorist training. And then there was another situation where it was a scenario where there's a Muslim girl in a school and she refuses to shake hands with a male teacher. What should we do? And one of the trainees put her hand up and she said, well, if she doesn't want to be British, she should go back from where she comes from. And the two ladies at the front, they nodded in approval. And I was just so shocked. I was like, this is the best training provider in the whole of the UK, and this is what they are teaching. And I was so frozen that I couldn't even challenge. I didn't know what to say or what to do, or because everyone was in agreement. I was like, what is happening here? And I remember going back and I was angry, I was upset, and I wrote a whole email, like a lengthy email around what the issues were and what in the training that day. And the response was, oh, we're sorry that we should have been a bit more sensitive to the fact that there were 2 women, white women, leading the session. And I said, that's not the issue here. The issue is the content. It doesn't matter who's leading it. It's the content of the session that I have an issue with. And because I kept pushing, they said, oh, we'll make up for it by doing another session. And they did the session 6 months later as an optional after school, where half the people that needed to be in that session did not attend. And that was their solution. And the school that I worked in, that I had the issues with, was linked to that training provider. So it's no kind of surprise that I had issues in that school, because all of those teachers have been through that same training at some point. So, and I remember when I was having issues in that school, I went back to that training provider and I said, I'm having these issues. I need your help, right? There was a cry out for help. And her response was, not every school is suited for every person. That was her response. And she goes, if you're so passionate, you should go up to government level and make changes. That was her solution. And I look back and I think, that is not the way that you support someone that's crying out for help. That is not the way. So, like, one of the things that I do want to do is to do diversity and inclusion training to show that there's a different way, an approach to take. So that's one thing that I've not accomplished, because I feel like maybe I'm not strong enough to do it yet. But I do remember someone pushed me, because I remember sharing this story with someone, and he pushed me to actually put something together. And he goes, this was before COVID, and then COVID hit, and then it didn't materialize. But he goes, your voice needs to be heard in schools. So I think you should put a program together, and we could, I could promote it in schools for you. So I did put like a 1-page plan together. And I thought, let me contact my old training provider, because I'll feel that sense of empowerment that I've gone back to them. And so I contacted her, we arranged a call, and it was the same lady that said that stuff to me. So I spoke to her and I said to her, well, I've got this training that I want to do. It'd be great if I could do it at the training. And I knew she wasn't going to agree, but I thought, let me just put it across to her. And she goes, oh yeah, I'll have a look at it. And we spoke for a little while, and she goes, I'm sorry that your experience here wasn't that great, and blah, blah, blah. But then I followed up in an email, and I was like, here's the material. And she goes, yes, I'll have a look at it, and I wish you all the best for the future, which kind of meant that she wasn't going to pursue it, right? But it's that kind of, you hit a wall in the places that really need people to go in and make changes. You can't, because they are not willing to listen. And I remember when I handed in my notice, it came after I'd copied in my deputy head, and I'd said to him, I'm having issues in the department. Can we have a meeting where you are present and we try and solve this? And he said, you need to have a meeting directly with your head of department. He refused to be there. And then when I had the meeting happened with my head of department, he yelled at me. He said, we do things the way we do here, and if you don't like it, tough. That was his conversation with me. And I remember leaving from there in tears and going, like, I can't stay here any longer. And then after that, they had like a period of 2 weeks of ignoring me, and then I got the back pains, and I handed in my notice. But the deputy head when I handed in my notice, he reached out to me, and he said, would you like to have a conversation with me about why you're leaving? And at first I said no. I was like, what's the point? Like, what's the point? Like, he's not going to listen. He had a chance to be there at the meeting, and he chose not to. So then I thought, leading up to the weeks came by, and I was really close to leaving. And I thought, actually, let me just air what I need to air before I go. Yeah. Because then it's going to hang over me. So I arranged to see him. I think it was a day or two before I actually physically left, because you have to give them a 3-month notice, like a term's notice. So I went to see him, and I sat in his office, and I said to him, if I was a white woman, I would not be having half the issues that I am. And his reaction, he laughed at my face. And he said, our school's very diverse. And I said, oh, yeah, the student body is, but you can talk down to the students. You can't talk down to another member of staff that's on your level.
Yeah.
And he just wouldn't, like, the people aren't willing to even listen. They're not even willing to listen. And I think that's part of the issue. Part of the issue is recognizing that we all have, and I say this to people, I don't like using the word racist and racism around because I don't think it solves anything. It makes people really defensive. The word that I tend to say is we all have unconscious biases. Everyone does. Every single person does. And for you to deny it, you're just lying to yourself. Like, I have them, you have them, everyone does. And I think the first thing that we need to do is to recognize what those unconscious biases are for us to then make sure that we're not acting on them, right? And to stop minimize acting on them. So I think having it work that way round doesn't make people defensive as much, but people are still willing to like listen. And a lot of people are not willing to listen. They're not willing to see that there's things wrong with the way that they do things. Like what my head of department said, he said, we do things the way that we do them and we've always done them this way. Well, I think that kind of shows you that there's, he always used to say to me as well, if kids are having fun in your class, then you're not teaching them properly. I used to make my classes fun, right? So it's a very old school, very kind of traditional way of teaching. And he goes, well, you're not teaching properly if they're having fun. Because I used to do project work and get them excited about stuff. And especially with the younger kids, like if you make it boring, I don't know. So there's just a lot wrong with the system and the way it's set up, and the fact that there's no support structure in place when there are issues. Like, I felt so alone. I felt like there was no one. I felt like I was the issue. I didn't even know what was going on at the time. And it wasn't until, and what gave me like the confidence to actually say that to my head of department, no, to my deputy head, was the fact that another member of staff came to me and said to me, I can see what's happening. He recognized it. He said, I can see what's happening. And this was before I handed in my notice. He goes, they've already written your job description. They were there to drive me out. They were deliberately trying to drive me out. And that's what the sad thing is. I think I was hired as a token minority because I ticked the boxes. They needed someone that ticked the box. Then they realized that I wasn't going to keep my mouth shut and get on with it, that I was going to challenge them on things, and they didn't like that. Then they wanted me out. And this is part of the issue with having a quota to hire. And lots of places do. They want to hire ethnic minorities because they want to show that they're diverse, but they don't want them to speak out. They don't want to. And there's a really, like, I think it's on YouTube, or is it on TikTok? There's like a little clip taking like a mick at this, where a guy's going in for an interview and he's ethnic minority, he's Asian, and they're saying, oh, well, we want to hire you because you tick the boxes for us, and we want you to appear in the photographs and to just walk around so our clients can see that you're like a ethnic minority, right? And he goes, so you don't want me to actually do any of the work around here? And they're like, oh, no, you leave that to the white guys. Right? So there's a video taking a joke at it, and that's basically how it feels sometimes, because you're made to feel that you're not good enough. I was made to feel like my voice wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough in the decisions I was making or the opinions that I had. That even, like, I'm pretty sure the kids picked up on it as well, like the way that the other staff were treating, because the kids treated me horrendously in that particular school. They picked up on it. And there was this notion that, like, I remember once my head of department, he just turned up randomly in my class, just turned up randomly to observe my lesson, and kept interrupting and saying, I hope everyone's behaving, or I don't know, he kept making remarks. And afterwards, I challenged him. I said, well, why were you in there? And he goes, oh, I had a complaint from a couple of kids. And I was like, well, why didn't you come and speak to me then? He said, oh, I didn't get a chance to speak to you. But you had a chance to come into my class. You could have emailed me. Like, there was ways around, right? Yeah. And it's this notion that I'm not good enough for you to speak to me. Like, you have to, no, this was his excuse. Oh, I was trying to provide you with support. it's support when I've asked for it. It's support when I need it and I've asked for it, right? It's not support if you think you're providing me with support and you're kind of pushing it on me. That's not support. And it's this notion where I'm not able to even think for myself to know what kind of support I need.
Yeah.
It just makes you feel so powerless. So there is work that I want to do around that, to kind of empower people to get other organizations to see that sometimes they don't even realize what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the expectations that they have of certain people can also then feed back, because if they've got low expectations, then that person's not going to live up to that. So yeah, that's what I think my future plan is going to be in that area that I want to work on. But I think I've pretty much summed up everything now.
You are absolutely fantastic. Do you know that that's your message that you have shared? Inspirational, inspiring, empowering to anyone listening. Yes, we're talking about this for International Women's Day, but it should empower absolutely everyone. And there's loads of things that I've taken away from this. Like when you said in schools that people, when they teach about maths and science and everything, and they just talk about white scientists. And I thought, well, I mean, because that's when you said that, the first thing that came into my head was unconscious bias, like you were saying, because you've got whole generations that are growing up with this idea because they haven't been stretched to see what their background is. I mean, I remember my daughter's another lover of maths. I'm afraid I'm the English student, she's the maths student. And she came back and she was so excited. Her birthday is the 12th of May. And when she found out it was the same day as Florence Nightingale, and she was so excited when she'd been taught that, and to remember and to have role models for girls. And everything you've said, I've got like goosebumps, because your story and your passion, you can change the world. You really can, with the ideas you're putting forward. And this is what I'm saying to every listener. Make sure you share this episode with as many people as possible. Because, yes, you were treated appallingly, and that is awful. I think women across, no, doesn't matter where we're from, we're treated differently. Both you and I, we excel in a STEM orientated subject area genre. I do IT and digital. Now I will go in, and that's why, all right, lockdown has kept my hair, my colour's changed a little bit, but normally I try and keep it blonde, and I go into an IT technology and it will be literally C-suite down. I'll be the only female, I'll be 5'2" and I'll be blonde, and they talk down to me. And I absolutely love wiping the floor with them, because I know what they're talking about. Like everything you've shared, the potential, yes, if I can help to promote it and get it as high as possible, I want everyone to realise, especially where we're talking about unconscious bias now, the work you've put forward, that should be rolled out at schools. It should be taught to the teachers. You should be trained the teachers first. But it is something that should be at infant school upwards, so that children are taught not to have any bias, or if they have, they need to understand and recognise it and see where the teaching has come from and stop it. Because, like, sorry.
I was going to say, I don't even think that the kids need to be taught it, because they pick up on what the adults are doing.
Yeah.
Kids don't naturally have a bias.
No.
They pick up, and if they see an adult teaching a treating a kid differently, they'll start to treat that kid differently as well. That's what I've noticed. So I think it's really about giving the adults the real training, and then you see the effect it has.
It is, and I think it's wonderful. And the whole idea, what you've done through COVID is such an exemplary idea, and learning to pivot. And this is where I wanted everyone to listen and see. When you have a career change, like you said, you sat there for a while and you thought, oh, a lot of people's income disappeared when we were shielding and everything stopped. But we've got the likes of Zoom, we've got online. You can teach to a global audience and share, and you can bring that into your virtual classrooms and actually interact. And it's fantastic. That gives a length and breadth to studies that you don't get in what you'd say the normal classroom environment, because you're just not taught that. And like you say, people, if it's either left or right brain, whichever it is, you're taught specifically to one side. And if you don't fit that mould, people actually pigeonhole you. I mean, my son, he was put on special needs. He was on the autistic spectrum, never quite got statemented, got right the way to level 4. And I used to go in and help him. And because I was helping him, and they saw that I knew how to interact with maybe children that have found things a bit harder and harder I'd end up with all of them, and they'd all talk to me, and it was just wonderful. And all it was is, like you said, no one gave them the chance. Yeah. No one listened to them. No one shared. And you just think, but why? These people, 9 times out of 10, like I said, their intellect is through the roof, but because they're not taught in the right way, it's not picked up. And everything you've said, I'm blown away. It's wonderful. This has been a fantastic interview, everything you've shared. And I know we talked before you came on, but definitely I'm going to ask so all the listeners can hear, will you come back and be a regular guest, Sid? Because your message is absolutely phenomenal. It really is. I mean, you've inspired me no end. And I think anyone listening, and to see, and I wish you'd been my teacher. The stuff you shared and everything, you just make it all fun. And like you say, and when you said you were told off almost for making class teaching fun, that's how people learn. If it's regimental and it's drummed into you, it's not going to stick. You need to have those wonderful memories that when you do come to the exam, you can think, oh, yes, I can remember when we were taught that, and you can see the interaction, and that's how you answer the exam questions. Because like you say, when you were taught to answer questions, you didn't necessarily understand the rudiments of it, but making it fun means that people they might go home and say, well, Miss, what can I do next? What can I research more? I love that. And that's how you get society to grow and learn and change the ideals that have been put in place for so many years that need to change.
Like I do one-to-one tutoring at the moment, and the way I don't plan the sessions anymore, because I go in and I say to the kid, what do you feel like doing today?
Yeah.
Right. And what do you feel like doing? And one of them, and I talk about this 7-year-old a lot, because he's so exciting to work with, because he's 7, he's on the spectrum, he comes up with the most amazing questions, and he helps me grow. And like one of the questions, like he said, can we talk about goldfish? One of the sessions he came out with, right? And I was like, goldfish? Why goldfish? He goes, oh, because I'm thinking of getting a pet goldfish. And then we decided to do the research together, and I found out so many amazing facts about goldfish. Like, they don't have eyelids. They sleep with their eyes open. They have like this surface where they're like the scales change color if they don't get enough sunlight. They go white. And it's like all of these things. I was like, I've got a new appreciation of goldfish now.
And it is lovely to actually find that, and to know that people want to have that much information, because then the goldfish will be looked after properly.
Yeah,
how many people, like we've seen in COVID, where they've brought animals, they've brought pets, and they haven't looked into how to look after them or anything. And then, like you said, I mean, I completely agree. I think it's going to be 2022 or longer that before things change.
Yeah.
So where we are now is likely to become the new norm in a lot of places. But it's taught us, like you, I haven't been out. I'm type 2 diabetic. I haven't been out since March of last year. And I've been very, very careful. And I remember going out for a walk, and I think it was earlier this year. It was nice February when we had the nice weather. And I was traumatised because it's supposed to be nice in the fresh air. People don't social distance. It scared the living daylights out of me. I kept my mask on, even when I was walking, when it's supposed to be okay outside. That was it. I went back to using the treadmill in the garage because I was not going to risk. And like you say, you don't know what you're carrying. And if you're going and mixing with other people, how unfair is that?
Yeah.
It is, and it's being aware of others' needs, which is what you've said throughout the whole of this interview. And so many people don't think like that. They just think about me, and they don't have the compassion to actually consider anyone else.
And I think one thing that I've learned throughout COVID is there's two, like, people have naturally spread into two areas, haven't they? Those that actually care about others and those that don't. And it's helped me to kind of filter out people that I just don't need connections with anymore. It's been a good filtering process, I think, for a lot of people. It's surfaced a lot of things, I think, for a lot of people, and they've prioritized what they think is good for them now. So one thing that I do think to be true is you need to know what your values are. And to stick very close to them, and to make sure that whoever you work with and whoever you decide to work with has to have those same sort of value sets, and friendships as well, same sort of value sets. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. It's understanding what's going on in other people's lives. When you said about the religions, and you actually hit home how little people are taught and to understand. And sometimes, because I'll be mortified and I'm thinking, and I will research and see, right, what's happening at what time. So that, you know, if you're working in a group, say you're working in a project, and like you said about Ramadan, if you've got someone that's fasting, you need to be aware of that and be considerate. Because if people are fasting and it's for a specific reason, and suddenly someone brings a load of donuts in or something, and you think, well, come on, just be fair. Think, and also towards the end of the day, your concentration. I mean, I know what I'm like if I try and do my keto fasting. I mean, do you find your concentration gets better or worse, or is it something that you almost attune to?
I'm not a foodie person as it is, so I find after I've eaten food, like, your blood all goes to your digestive system. So from a scientific perspective, when you've eaten food, the blood goes to your digestive system because it's working on digesting your food. So that's when you feel a bit kind of sleepy, and you feel like, so after I've eaten, don't try and talk to me then, or don't try and get me to do any work. It's not going to happen. And so I think for me, I've got a clearer head when I'm not eating. Because your blood is all in your head, it's not using any other part of your body, right? So I think even when I'm working on a normal basis outside of Ramadan, I try and push lunch until I know I can take 2-hour break, and because I know my head's not going to be in the right place after I've eaten. So I normally skip lunch as it is on a normal day anyway, so it's not too bad. I think it's more the lack of water for me. Especially when I'm teaching online. Like, I did a 3-hour training for businesses last Wednesday. Then I did 3 hours of tutoring straight after. That was painful because I talk, as you noticed. So that was exhausting. And then not being able to drink water. But yeah, the religion thing as well. Each culture will have its own input into the faith. So you can look at the stereotypical faith, black and white, but in each part of the world, that faith will be practiced differently because the culture has an effect. So this is why I'm so keen on looking at a country and then looking at their belief systems, because their belief systems are going to be different, and their dress codes are going to be different, and the way that they eat, the way that they do things are going to be different, because their culture is going to have an influence on that. And I think that's what's missing from RS. Like, we just look at it isolated, but no one follows a faith isolated. They are a product of their society and their culture and where they've grown up. So I think that's majorly missing from our education system at the moment. But I'm so hopeful that the next generation is going to be a lot different than what we've currently got.
But I think almost, say, the last 2 generations have changed dramatically, and to see the way people integrate and they get on and support each other. It's the adults, like you said, half the time it's the adults that cause so many of these problems. And like I said, if we're taught as a child the different information, because I sit there and cringe sometimes when Brits go on holiday and they don't even try and learn another language. And I am so embarrassed, because what does that make people look like abroad? What do they think of us if we're going out there? It's awful.
But I think it's also like the language we've become accustomed to use. Like if you're a British moving abroad, you're an expat. If it's any other any other nationality, you're an immigrant. And it's that difference in language, and also like because I'm Asian and I am British, I'm British Asian. I will never be classed as English. Right? It's a weird way that we use language. And I think the way that language has evolved, there's always been a separation of this is what we're trying to be and this is the other. Like there's a separation between the two. So I think, I don't know, I find language really interesting, because I remember going to a meeting once, and they go around and they ask you where everyone's from, and I said, yeah, I'm English. And they were like, no, you're not. I'm like, yeah, I was born in England, I'm English. But they weren't having it. And it's interesting how language has morphed into what it is, and the labels that we use on people and how we use them. And I just find it so fascinating that and maybe that's going to change as we go forward. But going back to like special educational needs, I find it so sad that lots of people dismiss kids because they've got special educational needs. And then when other kids see their treatment, then they're going to start treating them like that as well. Yeah. And I think it's really important that you don't make so much emphasis. Like when I did the workshops, we had kids with disabilities, we had kids on the spectrum, and they were made to feel part of the group. Yeah. And we didn't have to teach the other kids to teach them like to react a certain way, because they'd see the way that we are with them and they accepted that, and they were like that with them. And one thing that I did with my workshops, I always had kids age 5 to 14 in the same class. Yeah. Mixed age ability. And people are like, oh, that doesn't work. It definitely does. Yeah. It definitely does. Because the younger ones are the ones with the creative curiosity. They get the older ones thinking. The older ones are able to then able to help with the younger kids because their dexterity skills aren't yet there. So it works so nicely. And then it becomes about collaboration and not about competing, which is what I've always wanted to do with the kids. When they're the same age, they want to compete. They're like, you started off where I started off. They think in terms of ages, right? But their starting points are all different. But if they can visibly see we're all different ages, then there's no starting. They don't compete with each other. They don't even think about competing. And I think that's what's really nice about being able to break away from the norm and do things differently. And I think it's 5 or 6 years ago, I attended a public speaking course for adults, and it completely changed my life. And this is something that I suggest people to do. Like if there's a skill that makes you scared, and you've never ever done it, like do it, because it's going to change you. Because I remember going to that and being so terrified, and once I did it, it gave me the confidence to then go and do the radio. Yeah. And then I also had an interview on TV, which I would never have done had I not been doing the radio or had I not been to that public speaking. But it also made me think, like I was completely opposite as a kid. I was I'm an introvert by nature. You wouldn't think that, right? People think you're so confident. Like I'm an introvert. Like I can stay home and I cannot talk to anyone. It's fine. But then when I'm given the stage or I'm in an interview or I'm doing a workshop, I put on an act that this is Sid, right? And people this is how they know me. So I was a very quiet kid at school. I never spoke out, never put my hand up. Well, if I did, I really knew the answer. But I would never take part in discussions or stand at the front and talk. And I thought, if we give kids the empowerment to have a voice when they're really young, they will go on to do amazing things. Yes. So one of the other projects that I started was Little Speakers Club. This is it though. I start up so many projects. I literally need a team that is able to then continue the project so I can move on to another one. But I started up Little Speakers Club, and that was with that exact mission to kind of empower kids to have a voice. And one of the kids that came to that Little Speakers Club was 14. She had special education. She had learning difficulties. and her mum had pulled her out of school because the teachers didn't have high expectations of her. And she went through, she didn't say much for the first couple of sessions of the course. And then it was only a 6-week course. And then we came to developing our own speeches. And I said to her, you write something that you're passionate about. The 5-year-old wrote about water. She goes, there's chemicals in the water, and I'm passionate about that, so I'm going to talk about that. So that she did. And then one of the other boys, he was 6, he wrote about sweeps and how even numbers are not great for kids. These were the kids' ideas. The 14-year-old, the one with the learning difficulties, she said she wanted to talk about discrimination.
Wow.
This is a kid that the school had given up on and said that she's not capable of doing anything. She wanted to talk about discrimination. For someone who doesn't understand anything, apparently, understand discrimination.
Yeah.
And she talked about how no one should be judged by how they are, but the colour of their skin. She wore a headscarf as well, if they wear a headscarf. And she did that speech in front of 100 people.
Yeah.
And this is someone that the school had given up on.
Oh,
she had this voice.
You are so empowering. They are just phenomenal. And like you say, I love this. I love your entrepreneurial spirit as well. You and I are very similar, because I think of an idea and I run with it and then I grow with something else. So I see many, many conversations that you and I are going to have. I really do.
Yeah, we could probably do a podcast on each of the different businesses, right? And really delve deep into it.
It's wonderful. But also, anyone listening, you're giving this to the children as well. So we've got children growing up that are interested in wanting to learn and pivot and grow and see. Whereas we've probably had maybe the last generation seem to think that the way to get on is to go on to reality TV or marry a footballer. And I know people are probably going to be really angry at me saying that, but it is, you've got so many people that think that they're not supposed to go out and have a career. They're supposed to marry someone with money or literally do this whole reality thing, which is why so many people use social media in the wrong way. And that's another of my pet hates, where the people that they can't even have a meal without sharing it on social media. And what does that do to people's ideas and their dreams? Because I've said this a few times now, when people share a meal, everyone thinks they're phenomenal. You don't see all the bits, the 3 before that they put in the bin because it didn't work and stuff.
Yes.
And what does this do to the children? That they get bullied if they don't get enough likes. I do social media as part of my work, but it doesn't matter what the numbers are. If you connect with the one right person that needs to hear your message, that's what's important. Having loads of likes means absolutely nothing, because most people go along and press the like button and don't even read what's written. And that's me getting on my high horse as well.
This is one thing that I say to parents that are considering homeschooling, because they see all of these Instagram posts of these perfectly done classrooms at home and resources and the photos, and then go, that's not homeschool. I can't do anything like that. And I'm like, you do realize that the kids are probably screaming in the background, and then it's been like photoshopped and it's been put in a certain place. You're getting 1 second glimpse of what reality is really like, right? And that's not what homeschooling looks like at all. Kids are messy. Kids get stuff everywhere, and that's not what a reality, a real home looks like. And social media gives a false impression to a lot of people of how things are. And I think one way that I've used social media is my profile is open. People can go and read everything on there. And I'm very open. If I'm having a really bad month, they will hear about it. I'll talk about it and I'll share. And I had a really bad year in 2019 where I was working with the wrong people. A lot of people let me down. People heard about it on social media. I don't mention names, but I'll talk about situations where they haven't been great. Sometimes people see your success and they go, she's had it easy, right? But they don't realize it's like that iceberg model, right? Where you've got the tip of the iceberg at the top and then you've got the rest of the iceberg at the bottom. And people don't see what's at the bottom. And I try and share some of what's at the bottom in even the businesses that I work in. So with the businesses, the educators I work with, I shared the good parts and also the bits that haven't gone so great, and I'll tell them like, this has not been so great, these are the issues that I've gone through. And people appreciate you. People buy people these days. They don't buy an ideal anymore.
No.
They buy genuine people. And I think if you can relate to someone and you form that bond with that person, you've made that change. Like as educators, we make impact one child at a time.
Yeah.
And that is enough for me. And when we're going to be doing that retreat, there's only going to be like a small amount of kids in that school that we're going to be impacting. But for them, it's going to be an amazing thing for people that have come all the way from across the other side of the world that are going to be teaching them. They're going to love it. And then we're going to donate like our resources there. And then they're always going to cherish those, right? And it's that impact that you make to that one person that I think has that big influence. Like I'd rather go deep with one person than touch the surface with loads. And initially, I was touching the surface with loads, which is how we got to 12,000 kids. But as the years went on, I started to work with small amounts of kids, smaller groups, but on a longer term basis, because I knew I could make bigger impact and then they're going to go on and make that impact. But even the kids where I taught them one time, like I remember our famous Poo Workshop, where they basically learn about the digestive system, they learn about their teeth, everything, the foods that we eat, and then they make poo with real food. But we go through like the entire digestive system, and then we have like a cup at the end with a hole, which is representing the rectum and the anus, and we push the food. They push like the lump of food out, which basically looks like poo at the end, and they remember that. So even the kids that have just come to that one workshop will talk about that one workshop for years around the dinner table, and I'll hear it from the parents. They'll be like, yeah, they're still going on about it. So I know we have impact. I've made impact on the kids as well that have only come to one session. And it's nice because a lot of the kids, when I first started working in Femtinos, they were like 4 or 5, and now they're like teenagers. Yeah. And you kind of see them grow up and you become part of their family, and it's nice. It's nice to see that transition, and they become young adults. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what they go on to do, because I haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen them. Well, when I taught in a college, I've seen those kids go on to uni and then become like take senior roles in management and all sorts of things. But to see someone from a very young age go all the way across will be amazing, I think. And just to see the impact that they have. It's a shame that I can't keep a record of all of that, because it'd be so interesting to see what they end up doing.
But you are going to be able to follow some of them, if not all of them, and just think, that's going to be a fantastic book where you literally write about that story and show exactly what you've done. I mean, that's almost the memoirs that you say, right, when it's time I'm going to have a longer break now, that's when you write everything you've achieved, because it's phenomenal. It's wonderful. I'm loving listening to I won't call them stories, because they're not. They're treasures. They're what you're actually sharing. And I think everyone listening, they are going to be impacted by so many things that you've said, and it is absolutely wonderful. And I have just seen the time, so I am going to close. I'm going to close this interview down. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. I am loving this, and I know that the listeners will. But I'm going to go back to the International Women's Day, and I'm going to ask the question that I've asked every single one of my guests. Sid, what does choose to challenge mean to you?
I think choose to challenge for me means to challenge the norm. Yeah. Like, there's so much out there that we've just accepted because it's always been the way it's been. And I think it's time now to have new ideas, new innovation, and to challenge the norm. Yeah. And to challenge people, and to challenge what we've come to know, and to challenge ourselves as well.
Yeah. Oh, that is wonderful. And that is just a phenomenal message to end on. And like I've said, and I'm saying to the listeners, you've heard Sid say she will come back. She'll be a regular guest. So there will be lots of wonderful discussions and lots of pearls of wisdom shared. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It has been wonderful just listening to the treasures you have to share. So thank you, Sid.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Pearls of Wisdom podcast. We hope you have enjoyed the content shared. Please share with others who would like to enjoy these interviews and discussions. If you would like to support the podcast, please follow the link in the episode description. If you want to be a guest on the show, reach out and let's discuss next steps. Until the next time, enjoy your listening.